There are two ways to start Illustrator. One way is to go to the Studies page, right-click on a study, and select Illustrator. The other way, probably the most likely way, is to go in the main menu bar, which is new here, and click on Ascribe Illustrator. So let's have a look at what happens when you click here. I'm going to click on Ascribe Illustrator, and Illustrator will show up, and with a main dialog box here. That dialog box will either show the list of recent illustrations or the list of studies. When will it show what? Well, if there are some illustrations, if you have already created some illustrations, then it will display this list by default, the list of recent illustrations sorted by decreasing order of date, the most recent ones on the top. Because there are no illustrations, no recent illustrations, automatically you are directed to the studies pane. So let me cancel that out again here. I go back to the home page. So when I click on Ascribe Illustrator, what I will automatically see, because there are no illustrations available, it will be a list of studies, because it says, okay, you want to make an illustration, so what studies you want to create an illustration for? Okay, so in the studies pane here, I'm going to filter out and ask for the XYZ study. I select that study. I can double click on it, or I can say open. Both are okay. So I'm going to say open. What happens next is I'm directed to a secondary dialog box in which I have to specify the ID of the new illustration. So I'm going to say test 1 and a label for test 1. Okay, and I'm going to click OK. So it's now flipping the data, creating the illustration, and I'm going to say OK. So I now have an illustration. Okay, so let me now close that illustration. I'm going to go back to the home page and see what happens next. So I now have an illustration. It doesn't contain anything, but that's not a matter. I'm just trying to show you what happens when you log on to Ascribe Illustrator. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to be directed to that same first key dialog box here, and you see there is a difference. I'm not directed automatically to the studies page. I am directed to the list of recent illustrations. So when I open Illustrator, I either go to the list of recent illustrations or I go to the studies page if I don't have any illustrations. That doesn't matter. That doesn't mean I can't create a new illustration here. So if I want to create a new illustration, I first have to specify for which study. So I can now go to the studies page and do the same process again. I can go back to the recent illustrations page and select that recent illustration, open it up. Okay, so if you want to go into Illustrator, you can either right-click on the studies page, right-click on a study and select, create a new illustration or use an existing one, or, and the most likely, you go to the main page and the blue bar, click on Ascribe Illustrator, and you are directed to a dialog box that either displays the list of recent illustrations, and if there are none, the list of studies, so that you can create a new one for that study. Okay, now that I am in Illustrator, what are the first steps to do? Because I've heard some people are a little bit overwhelmed with the list of many icons and so you can see all the icons that cannot be used currently are dimmed out. That's new as well. Okay, so the first thing to do here is really three clicks. Okay, so add a new visualization. Okay, this visualization is automatically selected, so I can move it around and resize it. Okay, it's selected, meaning that you see the bar here is dark gray. If I want to unselect it, I click anywhere in the canvas background, click, so it's now unselected, and again some key icons are disabled again. Okay, so I'm going to select that visualization, and I now have to apply two things to it. A question, I'm going to take this question, and a visualization type. Let's make it a cross tab. So I now have a cross tab for that question. I do have my first visualization. And when I click on that visualization, it is selected. If I click anywhere else, it is unselected. So I select it. And when it's selected, I can do many things. When it's not selected, I can do way fewer things. Okay, now it's selected. Because it's selected, I do have access to all the properties of that visualization. So I can change, for instance, I want to see only the top 3 codes in that question, press enter, and I now see the top 3. Okay, if I want to change the visualization type, I can go to a bar chart or anything else. Okay.